Shattered Secrets. 8:45 a.m. A sunny day, a perfectly smooth road along the coast. Alex Harrison and his family were returning from a weekend filled with laughter and joy. Sarah sat in the front seat, gently touching Alex's hand, while their little son Thomas slept in the back seat, tightly hugging his teddy bear. The radio played their favorite song, and the world seemed peaceful and safe. In this moment of happiness, there wasn't the slightest hint of the tragedy that was about to unfold. A phone call. It was an important client Alex had been waiting to hear from for days. He was distracted for just a second, long enough not to notice the car that suddenly swerved into their lane. A crash. Time slowed down. Screams, the sound of tearing metal, and then silence. Well, when Alex regained consciousness, he saw the mangled remains of the car and felt a wave of pain and horror tear through him. Sarah and Thomas were motionless. There was no one around to help. The only sound Alex could hear was the monotonous ringing in his ears and the whisper of his own heart. Why did I survive? This moment changed his life forever. A life full of plans was wiped out in a single instant. Alex didn't yet know that this day would be the beginning of a journey that would lead him to revelations more shocking than the death of his loved ones. But his suffering wouldn't end there. It was only just beginning. 3 months had passed since the day Alex Harrison's life shattered, along with his car, on the side of that ill-fated road. Time had lost its meaning. The days blurred into a series of silent nights and aimless days. Once a successful businessman, Alex now struggled to find the strength to simply get out of bed. His home, once filled with warmth and laughter, was now cold and empty, just like his heart. Alex immersed himself in memories, replaying moments of happiness spent with Sarah and Thomas. Those memories had always seemed so eternal, so unbreakable. But that was before fate intervened irrevocably, leaving him alone amidst the wreckage of his life. A deep sense of guilt gnawed at his soul. He blamed himself for that phone call, for that brief moment of distraction, for not being able to save them. But even in this darkness, there was a faint spark. Mrs. Wilson, their old housekeeper, tried to support Alex. She suggested that he channel his pain into something positive, into helping others. Her words struck a chord within him. The suggestion didn't bring him comfort, but it did offer a sense of purpose, however temporary. And so, after several weeks of reflection, Alex decided to emerge from his cocoon of isolation. He began selling off stocks, closing projects, and handing over management of the company to a trusted partner. Everything he had once known and loved no longer mattered. The only thing he wanted now was to find a way to atone for his guilt and perhaps ease someone else's pain. His first act of charity was directed at a local orphanage that was in desperate need of support. He decided to visit it personally to ensure that the funds would be used properly. Alex couldn't have imagined that this visit would forever change his life. He arrived at the orphanage on a cold autumn day. The moment he crossed the threshold, his heart tightened with pain. Memories of Thomas flooded back with renewed intensity. However, as soon as he saw the children playing in the yard, his attention was drawn to one boy. The child bore such a striking resemblance to Thomas that Alex momentarily forgot where he was. It was as if his son stood before him, the way he might have looked if he had survived. This encounter stirred forgotten emotions within Alex. A desire awoke in him to learn more about the boy, whose name was Logan. Why did he feel such a strong pull toward this child? Why did every glance from Logan make Alex's heart beat faster? The answers to these questions could turn out to be more terrifying than he expected. Alex couldn't get the image of Logan out of his mind. The boy seemed to haunt his thoughts, as if there was an invisible connection between them. After his visit to the orphanage, Alex tried to convince himself that his feelings were just a projection of his grief. But deep inside, a strange unease grew stronger, as if fate was persistently nudging him toward a mystery waiting to be uncovered. The next day, Alex returned to the orphanage under the pretense of meeting with the administration. He carefully concealed his true motive, seeing Logan again. The caregivers told him the boy's story. Logan had been left at the orphanage as an infant, with no documents or information about his origins. No one knew who his parents were or why he had been abandoned. The more Alex learned, the more his inner turmoil grew. Logan was too much like Thomas. The same hair color, the same eyes. Even the way he smiled reminded him of his son. Alex knew these similarities could be mere coincidence, but his intuition suggested otherwise. He couldn't ignore the strange feeling that he was standing before his lost son. Unable to keep this to himself, Alex turned to his old friend and attorney, Dan Morgan. Dan was an experienced lawyer who had represented Alex's interests for many years. They met in Dan's office, where Alex laid out his suspicions. Dan listened with a skeptical expression, but seeing how much it mattered to Alex, he agreed to help. "Alex, you need to understand that the likelihood of Logan being Thomas is extremely slim. But if you want to know the truth, we can do a DNA test. That's the most accurate way to get an answer," Dan said, trying to maintain professional distance despite the oddity of the situation. Alex knew it was necessary, but inside, fear and hope battled fiercely. What if Logan really was Thomas? How had he ended up in the orphanage? And if he wasn't, could Alex bear yet another heartbreak? The decision was made. They would arrange for the test as soon as possible. All that was left was to wait for the results. But the days dragged by painfully slowly. Alex buried himself in work, focusing on charitable projects. But thoughts of Logan never left his mind. Meeting the boy had stirred up a storm of emotions. Deep sorrow mixed with a faint glimmer of hope. One evening, after a tiring day, Alex returned home and found a forgotten item on his desk: Thomas's teddy bear. He had completely forgotten about it. Alex picked up the toy, feeling a shiver run through his body. This bear was the last tangible connection to his son. As he looked at it, he realized he could no longer live in uncertainty. The DNA results could either destroy him completely or give him a chance at a new life. Alex was ready for any outcome, but deep down, he already knew, no matter what happened, his life would never be the same. Alex waited for the DNA test results, as if waiting for a verdict. Several agonizing days filled with anxiety and anticipation passed. His mind swirled with questions. What if Logan is truly Thomas? How did he end up in the orphanage? Why didn't anyone inform me that he was alive? Each new question brought more uncertainty and fear. The day finally arrived when Dan Morgan, his lawyer and friend, was scheduled to deliver the result. Alex had struggled to keep himself occupied that morning, but neither work nor charitable projects could distract him from the looming conversation. When Dan finally arrived, Alex was already on edge. His nerves stretched to the breaking point. The atmosphere in the office was heavy with silence. Dan placed the envelope on the table, and Alex felt his heart skip a beat. In that moment, his entire world narrowed down to the small piece of paper inside that envelope, which could change his life. "Alex, before you open this, I want you to know, whatever is in there, you've already done everything you could," Dan said, trying to prepare his friend for any outcome. Alex nodded, took a deep breath, and slowly opened the envelope. For a moment, everything around him seemed to freeze. Alex couldn't believe his eyes. The results were positive. Logan was indeed his son, Thomas. The child he thought had died in that terrible accident. Joy and shock collided within him. For a brief moment, he felt relief. Thomas was alive, but along with it came a flood of other emotions. How had his son ended up in an orphanage? Why had Thomas been separated from his family for all these years? Alex felt a rising anger within him, quickly replaced by a determination to uncover the truth. He turned to Dan once more. How could this have happened? How could he end up in an orphanage when I was sure he had died? We need to get to the bottom of this. Dan, sharing his frustration, suggested hiring a private investigator who could help uncover what happened after the accident. And so began a new chapter in their quest for the truth. Alex felt that this was no longer just a matter of justice. It was his new purpose, his duty as a father. Thousands of thoughts raced through his mind, but one stood out clearly. He wouldn't stop until he knew what happened to his son that fateful day, and who was responsible for his disappearance. The investigator recommended by Dan was experienced and resourceful. Marcus Blake was known for successfully solving even the most complicated cases. Alex met with him the very next day, hoping for quick answers. "Marcus, I need you to find out everything you can about what happened to my son after the accident. He was alive, but somehow ended up in an orphanage, and no one knew about it. I have to know the truth," Alex said, as they sat in the investigator's office. Marcus listened carefully, then nodded and calmly replied, "I'll start with the hospital, where he may have been taken after the accident. If he was alive, someone must have hidden it. We'll find out who, Mr. Harrison." As Alex left the office, he felt a new sense of purpose, a mix of hope and anger. He knew the road ahead would be long and filled with challenges. But now, he had a goal: to reclaim his son and confront those who had torn them apart. The investigation had only just begun, and Alex was ready to go to any lengths to uncover the whole truth. The days that followed were fraught with tension as Alex waited for updates from Marcus. He knew that answers wouldn't come quickly, but every moment of waiting felt like an eternity. His mind raced with scenarios, ranging from the simplest to the most horrifying. What if Logan ended up in the orphanage because of a mistake? Or worse, what if someone had deliberately hidden him away? But who and why? Finally, after a week of agonizing anticipation, Marcus scheduled a meeting to discuss the initial findings of the investigation. They met in the same office where it had all begun. Marcus's serious and focused demeanor immediately put Alex on edge. "Alex, I started with the hospital where the victims of that accident were taken. I found records, but they don't fully match the official version of events," Marcus began. Thomas was indeed brought to the hospital. He was in critical condition, but alive. The problem is that his records vanished a few days later. The documents state that he died, but no body was ever released to you or to the authorities, as would normally happen. Alex felt the ground shift beneath him. "What are you saying? Someone took him?" "It appears so," Marcus confirmed. "I tracked down a nurse who worked at the hospital at the time. She remembers that the child was moved to another department, but after that, she heard nothing more about him. Her colleague, a nurse named Rachel McGrady, suddenly resigned shortly after these events. She might know more." Alex could barely contain his emotions. "Did you find her?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, she's living in a small town nearby. I've arranged a meeting with her tomorrow. It's best if you're there." The next day, Alex and Marcus traveled to the town where Rachel McGrady now lived. They met her in a quiet cafe on the outskirts, away from prying eyes. Rachel was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, but there was a trace of fear in her gaze when she realized that Marcus wasn't alone. Alex sat down across from her, trying to keep his voice steady. "Rachel, I'm Alex Harrison. My son was brought to your hospital after the accident, but then he disappeared. I need to know what really happened." Rachel lowered her eyes for a moment, as if gathering her thoughts. Then She spoke quietly but firmly. "Mr. Harrison, I was there when your son was brought in. He was in bad shape, but we were doing everything we could to save him. A few days later, he was transferred to the intensive care unit. But one night, a man came to the hospital. He claimed to be a relative of the boy and had all the necessary documents. But there was something malicious in his eyes, and I didn't trust him. I couldn't prove anything, but I knew something was wrong." Alex clenched his fists. "What did you do?" Rachel continued with difficulty. "I decided to take action. When the man was distracted, I snuck Thomas out of the hospital through the back entrance and hid him at a friend's place. I didn't know what else to do, so I contacted the only orphanage that could take him and left him there. Then I resigned from the hospital, so no one could find me." Rachel's words hit Alex like a sledgehammer. He couldn't believe it was true. His son had been alive all these years, but someone had tried to kidnap him, and Rachel had saved Thomas, though she didn't know it was his son. "Why didn't you go to the police?" Alex asked, struggling to keep his voice from breaking. "I was afraid that man would find us both, and something told me he wouldn't stop at anything, so I did what I thought was right," Rachel replied, her eyes filled with sorrow. Marcus interjected, "We need to find out who this man was and why he was after your son, Alex. This is only the beginning." Alex knew there was no turning back now. He vowed to himself that he wouldn't stop until he found the people responsible and brought his son back where he belonged. But he also understood that what lay ahead would be an even more dangerous and complicated investigation. After Rachel's revelations, Alex couldn't sit still. His mind was consumed with anger and a burning desire to uncover the truth. Who was this man who tried to take his son? Why was Thomas hidden in an orphanage while Alex was led to believe his child had died? The questions multiplied, and the answers were still hidden behind a veil of secrets. Marcus wasted no time. He dove deep into the investigation, starting with the hospital where Thomas had last been officially recorded. He filed requests in the archives, interviewed former staff, and examined security footage. Bit by bit, he began to piece together a picture, though each new piece only made the situation more complicated. Marcus uncovered records showing that a man with forged documents had indeed come to the hospital. The security footage, though blurry, captured a shadowy figure leaving the building. But the most critical discovery was the name on the forged documents: John Rivers. It was a false identity, but behind it lay the real person: Michael Grace, a known criminal and child trafficker. Marcus shared his findings with Alex. "This Michael Grace isn't just any criminal. He's been involved in illegal child trafficking rings for years. What we're dealing with here is a well-organized network, and I'm afraid they're more dangerous than we initially thought." Alex felt his anger deepen. He realized that he was up against not just a single man, but a vast, sinister organization. The stakes were higher than he had ever imagined, but that only strengthened his resolve. He had to learn the truth and protect his son at all costs. Marcus continued his investigation, focusing on Michael Grace's connections to high-level criminals. However, every time they got closer to the truth, new obstacles arose. Michael Grace was a master of disguise, slipping away whenever they thought they had found him. But one thing became clear: Michael wasn't working alone. A powerful organization was backing him, and Alex began to suspect that this could be tied to his own past business dealings. One evening, Marcus returned with shocking news. "Alex, I've uncovered something disturbing. Michael Grace was connected to one of the companies your firm did business with a few years ago. The contract was terminated under mysterious circumstances, but I don't think that was a coincidence. This organization may have been using your business as a front for their illegal operations." Alex could hardly believe what he was hearing. Are you saying they were right under my nose this whole time? It's possible, Marcus replied. And if that's the case, they've known more about you than you ever realized. Perhaps they originally planned to use your business for their own gain, and when you became a threat, they decided to remove you from the equation. Alex felt a chill run down his spine, but he quickly steeled himself. Then we have to find them and stop them. I won't let these people control my life and endanger my son any longer. At this point, Alex decided to take a more active role. He began using his own resources and connections to assist Marcus in the investigation. He reached out to former colleagues who might know more about the organization, as well as contacts in law enforcement to gather as much information as possible about Michael Grace and his partners. The investigation intensified, and with each passing day, Alex realized that he was entangled in something far more dangerous and sinister than he could have ever imagined. But now he had a purpose, and he would not rest until he uncovered the whole truth and reclaimed his son. Marcus and Alex knew that there would be many more challenges ahead, but they were prepared to face whatever came their way. The truth was getting closer, but with it, so was the danger that threatened to destroy everything Alex had left in his life. Weeks passed, filled with intense work and constant danger. Alex and Marcus delved deeper into the investigation, uncovering more about Michael Grace and his connections. What they found was disturbing. This was no ordinary criminal ring. They were up against a highly organized network, involved in a wide range of illegal activities, from child trafficking to money laundering and arms smuggling. The deeper they dug, the more Alex realized just how far-reaching and powerful this network was. It wasn't just a few criminals. They had influence in law enforcement, business, and even government. Alex and Marcus knew they had to be extremely careful. One wrong move could cost them everything. During the investigation, Marcus discovered that one of Alex's former business partners, Jacob Stanley, might be connected to this network. Jacob, a prominent figure in the financial world, had deep ties with people whose names kept surfacing in their investigation. This revelation was a turning point. It seemed that the criminals had infiltrated Alex's business circle, perhaps even using his company as a cover for their operations. Alex decided to confront Jacob directly to learn more. He invited Jacob to dinner at an upscale restaurant where they could talk privately. Jacob, unaware of Alex's true intentions, accepted the invitation, not knowing that this dinner could be the beginning of the end for his illicit dealings. Over dinner, Alex started with light conversation, trying to hide his growing tension. Jacob spoke about his recent successes in business, completely unaware that Alex already knew about his darker dealings. But as the conversation progressed, Alex gradually steered it toward their business associates and major deals. When he mentioned Michael Grace's name, Jacob tensed slightly, but quickly regained his composure. Michael? Oh yes, I remember him. He handled logistics for one of our subsidiaries. But you know how it is, Alex. People come and go in this business. Not all of them stick around for long, Jacob said, trying to sound casual. Jacob's response was vague, but Alex sensed a hint of nervousness in his tone. This only confirmed Alex's suspicions. Jacob was more deeply involved with Michael Grace than he was letting on. After dinner, Alex shared his thoughts with Marcus. They both realized that Jacob knew more than he was willing to admit, and that they needed to find out exactly what role he played in the criminal network. However, they had to proceed cautiously. Jacob was a smart and influential man who could unleash his own resources against them if he felt threatened. Marcus proposed that they place Jacob under surveillance and investigate his associates to gather more evidence. Alex agreed, understanding that this might be their only chance to expose the entire network. Meanwhile, Marcus continued to track Michael Grace's movements. He discovered that Grace was hiding out in a secluded mansion on the outskirts of the state. The mansion was heavily guarded, making it nearly impossible to approach undetected. But Marcus knew that answers could be found there. They decided to take a risk. Marcus devised a plan to infiltrate the mansion and gather evidence, possibly even capturing Michael Grace. Alex insisted on participating. He couldn't stay on the sidelines when his son's fate hung in the balance. The night of the operation was cold and dark. Alex and Marcus approached the mansion, carefully avoiding cameras and guards. Once inside, they found the mansion empty. Only in the basement did they discover what they had been searching for: documents, computer files, and photographs linking Michael to other key figures in the network. But before they could examine everything, the mansion was surrounded. The guards had returned sooner than expected. Alex and Marcus were trapped. They knew they couldn't surrender. The stakes were too high. They hid in one of the mansion's hidden passages, waiting for the danger to pass. But one thing was clear: they were closer to the truth than ever before, and their enemies knew it. Alex now understood that the truth was far more dangerous than he had imagined, but he was willing to go to any lengths to uncover it, even if it meant facing the darkest shadows of his past. Trapped within the cold walls of the mansion's hidden passage, Alex and Marcus realized that their plans were rapidly unraveling. They couldn't stay hidden for long, and the risk of being discovered grew with each passing minute. The guards knew someone had infiltrated the mansion, and they had intensified their search. Alex could hear the heavy footsteps growing closer. His instinct screamed that they needed to act, or they wouldn't make it out alive. Marcus remained calm, despite the escalating danger. He signaled Alex to stay put while he scouted for an escape route. Suddenly, in the distance, an alarm blared loudly. The guards, now distracted, rushed toward the source of the noise, giving Alex and Marcus a brief window of opportunity. Sensing their chance, they slipped out of their hiding place and headed toward a rear exit. Fortunately, Marcus had memorized the mansion's layout during his reconnaissance, and he knew of a hidden passage that led into the forest beyond the property. They managed to slip past the guards and escape into the night. As they reached the safety of the trees, Alex felt a wave of relief, but he knew they had only narrowly avoided disaster. On the way back to the city, Marcus began analyzing the materials they had recovered from the mansion. The documents revealed a vast network of connections between Michael Grace and several high-profile individuals, including politicians and business leaders. The most shocking revelation was that some of these individuals had previously worked with Alex. This discovery shook Alex to his core. Everything he had built and believed in was tainted by the corruption of those around him. Marcus suggested they hand the evidence over to the police and launch a formal investigation, but Alex wasn't convinced that this would be enough. He couldn't trust a system that had already been compromised by the same people they were trying to expose. He decided that they would have to take matters into their own hands to bring the entire network down. Marcus agreed, and they began planning their next move. As they dug deeper into the documents, they found a lead that could help them. Michael Grace was preparing for a major transaction involving child trafficking, scheduled to take place in just a few days. This was their chance to strike. If they could disrupt the deal and capture Michael, they could finally expose the entire operation. Alex knew this was their last shot at saving Thomas. If the deal went through, they might lose track of Michael forever. Time was against them, and every action required precision and determination. Using his old connections, Alex was able to gather critical information and secure the necessary support for their plan. They prepared an ambush at the location where the deal was set to take place. A rundown warehouse on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by dense woods. Alex and Marcus set up surveillance equipment and arrived early, making sure everything was in place. They were confident they could take down Michael and dismantle the network. But then, things began to spiral out of control. When Michael arrived, he was accompanied by far more security than they had anticipated. Instead of the usual exchange, a firefight erupted between his men and a rival criminal group who had also targeted the deal. Chaos ensued, and Alex realized that they were losing control of the situation. In the midst of the gunfight, Marcus spotted Michael attempting to escape through a side exit. Without hesitation, Alex chased after him, knowing this was their only chance to get answers and save his son. The pursuit led them through darkened corridors of the warehouse, the sounds of gunfire and shouting echoing around them. Finally, Alex cornered Michael in a dead-end hallway. Michael, realizing he was trapped, dropped his weapon and raised his hands. "You want the truth, Harrison?" he sneered, breathing heavily. "You're not gonna like it. Everything you knew is a lie. And even if you kill me, it won't change anything. They'll come for you and your son, and no one will save you." Michael's words struck a deep chord within Alex. He was ready to do whatever it took to get the truth out of him. But just as Alex prepared to confront Michael, the police stormed the warehouse, taking Michael into custody before Alex could finish the conversation. Once again, fate had intervened, leaving Alex with more questions than answers. Standing alone in the dimly lit corridor, Alex realized that the mystery was growing more complex, and now he had enemies he hadn't even anticipated. Alex's nerves were frayed as he watched the police haul Michael Grace away in handcuffs. Just moments ago, he had been on the brink of discovering the truth, but now it felt like the ground had been ripped out from under him. He knew that Michael's arrest wasn't the end. Far from it, there were others behind the scenes, powerful figures who wouldn't hesitate to eliminate anyone standing in their way. And Alex had just made himself their prime target. The next day, Marcus delivered grim news. Michael Grace had been found dead in his jail cell, an apparent suicide. The authorities were quick to close the case, but Alex and Marcus knew better. It was clear that Michael had been silenced before he could talk, likely by the very people he was working for. The realization hit Alex hard. The network they were up against was far more dangerous than they had imagined. Frustrated and running out of options, Alex and Marcus decided to dig deeper into the evidence they had recovered from the mansion. They knew that somewhere in those files was the key to dismantling the network. But time was not on their side. Every move they made was being watched, and every lead they followed seemed to bring them closer to the edge of a deadly trap. Then, something unexpected happened. Alex received an anonymous message directing him to meet in an abandoned industrial area on the outskirts of the city. The message promised crucial evidence that would bring down the entire operation, but it came with a warning. Alex had to come alone, or his son would be in danger. Alex wrestled with the decision. He knew it could be a trap, but he also knew it could be his only chance to finally uncover the truth and protect his son. After a sleepless night of contemplation, he made up his mind. He would go to the meeting, but he wouldn't go unprepared. Despite Marcus's objections, Alex insisted on handling this alone. He had already put too many people in danger, and he wasn't willing to risk anyone else. Before leaving, he made arrangements for Thomas's protection, ensuring that Marcus and a trusted team would watch over him while Alex confronted the unknown. The industrial area was cold and desolate as Alex arrived, his senses on high alert. The place was eerily quiet, the wind howling through the broken windows of the abandoned buildings. Alex cautiously made his way to the designated meeting point, his hand never far from his concealed weapon. As he entered the rundown warehouse, he noticed a faint light coming from a small room at the far end. Inside the room, Alex found a single table with a pile of documents, a USB drive, and a handwritten note. "This is your key. Use it wisely." He quickly scanned the documents, which revealed shocking details about the criminal network. Names, financial transactions, and evidence linking the organization to high-ranking officials. It was everything he needed to destroy them, but there was something more. Something that made his blood run cold. The documents included a list of individuals who had been eliminated by the network. As Alex scrolled through the list, his heart sank when he saw a familiar name. Dan Morgan, his trusted lawyer and friend. Dan had been dead for years, killed in a car accident that Alex had always believed was an unfortunate tragedy. But now, it was clear it had been no accident. Dan had been silenced because he knew too much, just as Michael Grace had been. At that moment, Alex realized that the enemy wasn't just after his son. They had been targeting him for years. Everything he thought he knew, every tragic event in his life, had been orchestrated by the shadowy figures in this network. And now, they were closing in on him and Thomas. Suddenly, Alex heard footsteps approaching. He quickly grabbed the documents and prepared to confront whoever was coming. To his shock, it was someone he never expected to see, Jacob Stanley, the very business partner Alex had suspected of being involved in the network. But this time, Jacob wasn't alone. He was flanked by armed men, and his expression was one of cold resolve. "Alex, you should have stayed out of this," Jacob said, his voice devoid of emotion. "But you always had to dig deeper, didn't you? You could have walked away, but now you've left me no choice." Alex's mind raced as he tried to process the betrayal. "So it was you all along," Alex said, his voice steady despite the tension. "You've been part of this network from the beginning." Jacob nodded. "Yes, and now you've become a problem I need to eliminate. But don't worry, your son will be well taken care of once you're out of the picture." In that moment, Alex knew there was no negotiating. He had walked right into the trap, but he wasn't going down without a fight. He quickly drew his weapon, and chaos erupted. The sound of gunfire filled the warehouse as Alex fought off Jacob's men with everything he had. Despite being outnumbered, his determination to protect his son gave him the strength to keep fighting. But just as the situation seemed hopeless, the sound of approaching sirens echoed through the air. Marcus had anticipated the danger and had called in backup. SWAT teams stormed the warehouse, quickly overpowering Jacob's men. In the chaos, Jacob tried to escape, but Alex caught up with him. With nowhere left to run, Jacob sneered at Alex. "You think you've won? This is just the beginning. There are others more powerful than you can imagine. You'll never stop them." Alex, his gun trained on Jacob, replied with quiet determination. "Maybe I won't, but I'll make sure you can't hurt anyone ever again." As the police arrived to take Jacob into custody, Alex felt a sense of grim satisfaction. He had lost so much, but he had finally struck a blow against the people who had taken everything from him. He knew the fight wasn't over. There were still others out there, pulling the strings. But for now, he had won a crucial battle. With the evidence he had gathered, Alex knew he could expose the network to the world. He could bring down the corrupt officials and business leaders who had hidden in the shadows for too long. But most importantly, he could finally protect his son and give him the future he deserved. As he left the warehouse, Alex realized that his life would never be the same. The truth had been revealed, but it had come at a high cost. Yet, despite the losses, he knew one thing for certain. He would never stop fighting for those he loved, no matter what the future held. In the aftermath of the confrontation, Alex and Thomas retreated to a secluded cabin deep in the woods, far from the chaos that had consumed their lives. The cabin, owned by an old friend of Marcus, was well hidden and secure, a safe haven where they could finally catch their breath and plan their next steps. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Alex allowed himself to hope that they might find peace. Thomas, though too young to fully grasp the danger they had been in, sensed the tension in his father. Alex did his best to shield his son from the worst of it, focusing on the small joys of their new life. They spent their days exploring the forest, fishing in the nearby stream, and sharing quiet moments by the fire. But even in these moments of calm, Alex knew this tranquility was temporary. The shadows of the past still lingered, and the fight wasn't over. Meanwhile, Marcus and the small team Alex had assembled continued working tirelessly to unravel the criminal network. The evidence they had recovered from the mansion and the warehouse was slowly revealing the full extent of the organization's reach. But as they dug deeper, they uncovered something even more alarming. A mole within their own ranks. Someone feeding information back to the very people they were trying to expose. This discovery shook Alex to his core. He had trusted the people around him, and now it seemed that trust had been betrayed. The mole was someone close to them, someone who had access to their plans and could easily sabotage their efforts. Marcus launched an investigation to root out the traitor, knowing that if they didn't act quickly, everything they had worked for could be undone. One evening, just as the sun was setting behind the trees, Alex received an anonymous message on his phone. The message contained coordinates and a simple instruction. "Meet me here. Come alone." There was no signature, no indication of who had sent it, but the tone was unmistakable. It was a warning. Alex's instincts screamed that this could be a trap, but he also knew he couldn't ignore it. Whoever had sent the message might be the key to uncovering the mole, or even taking down the entire network. After careful consideration, Alex decided he would go, but he would be prepared for anything. He left Thomas in the care of Marcus, ensuring his son would be safe while he ventured into the unknown. Before he departed, Alex gave Marcus a copy of all the evidence they had gathered, along with instructions on what to do if he didn't return. "If something happens to me, promise me you'll keep Thomas safe," Alex said, his voice steady despite the weight of the request. Marcus nodded, his expression grim but resolute. "You have my word, Alex." The coordinates led Alex to an abandoned factory on the edge of town. The building was a relic of the past, its walls crumbling and its windows shattered. Alex parked his car at a distance and approached the factory on foot, his senses on high alert. As he stepped inside, the silence was deafening, broken only by the distant sound of dripping water and the echo of his footsteps. In the center of the factory's main floor, he found a figure waiting in the shadows. As Alex drew closer, the figure stepped into the light, revealing a familiar face. Jacob Stanley, the same man Alex had exposed and brought down, was standing before him, alive and well. "Surprised to see me, Alex?" Jacob's voice dripped with malice. "You really thought it would be that easy?" Alex's heart raced, but he kept his composure. "I saw you taken away in handcuffs. How are you here?" Jacob smirked. "You underestimated the people I work for. They don't just let their assets rot in prison. They pulled a few strings, and here I am, ready to finish what we started." Before Alex could respond, a group of armed men emerged from the shadows, surrounding him. It was clear this was a trap, and Alex had walked right into it. But Jacob wasn't finished. "You've been a thorn in our side for far too long. We gave you chances to back off, but you just couldn't let it go. Now you're going to pay for it with your life." Despite the dire situation, Alex refused to show fear. He had faced death before, and he wasn't about to back down now. "If you're going to kill me, do it. But know this, the evidence we've gathered is already in the hands of people who won't stop until your entire operation is destroyed." Jacob's eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that." As the tension reached its peak, the sound of approaching vehicles filled the air. Marcus had anticipated the danger and followed Alex, bringing backup with him. Within moments, the factory was surrounded by law enforcement, and a fierce firefight broke out. Alex took cover, using the chaos to his advantage. In the confusion, Alex saw Jacob trying to escape. Fueled by a surge of determination, he pursued him, determined to end this once and for all. The chase led them through the dilapidated corridors of the factory until they reached a dead end. With no way out, Jacob turned to face Alex, his expression twisted with rage and desperation. "This isn't over, Alex. Even if you kill me, there are others. You'll never stop us all." Alex raised his gun, his voice cold and unwavering. "Maybe not, but I can stop you." The sound of the gunshot echoed through the factory, signaling the end of Jacob Stanley's reign of terror. As the dust settled and the authorities moved in to secure the area, Alex knew that one chapter of his fight had finally come to a close. But as he walked away from the scene, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from the end. The network was vast and powerful, and there were still dangerous figures lurking in the shadows. Yet, for the first time in a long while, Alex felt a glimmer of hope. He had protected his son, dismantled a key part of the organization, and now had the evidence to expose the rest. Returning to the cabin, Alex embraced Thomas, holding him close as he whispered, "It's over, buddy. We're safe now." But deep down, he knew their new life would still come with challenges. The fight wasn't over, but together they were stronger, and Alex was ready to face whatever came next. For a few brief days, Alex allowed himself to believe that the worst was behind them. He and Thomas remained at the secluded cabin, surrounded by the tranquility of nature. The danger seemed distant, as if it had finally been defeated. But in the back of Alex's mind, a nagging feeling lingered, a sense that something was still unresolved. Marcus, now a trusted ally, continued to work behind the scenes to dismantle the remnants of the criminal network. The evidence they had gathered was being processed, and plans were in place to take down the remaining key players. Yet, even as these plans unfolded, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that the fight wasn't truly over. One evening, while Thomas slept peacefully, Alex received an unexpected phone call. The number was blocked, but the voice on the other end was chillingly familiar. "Hello, Alex. I assume you thought it was over?" Alex's blood ran cold. It was the voice of the man who had orchestrated everything, the true mastermind behind the network, the man who had been pulling the strings from the shadows all along. "I see you've made it this far, but you've only seen a fraction of the game," the voice continued. "You've taken out some of our pawns, even a few knights, but the king is still very much in play. And now, it's time for the endgame." Alex's hand tightened around the phone. "Who are you? What do you want?" A low chuckle came through the line. "I'm someone who knows how to play the long game. Someone who's been watching you for a very long time. You see, Alex, this was never just about your son. It was about you." The words sent a shiver down Alex's spine. "What do you mean?" "You were chosen, Alex. We needed someone with your skill, your determination, your drive. Everything that's happened, your success, your tragedies, even the people you lost, was all part of the plan. We needed to mold you into the person you are now, to test your limits, to see if you could become what we needed. And you didn't disappoint." Alex felt a wave of nausea. "You're lying. I'm not a pawn in your game." "Oh, but you are," the voice replied smoothly. "You've been part of this from the beginning. Even your old friend, Dan Morgan. He wasn't just killed because he knew too much. He was killed because he tried to warn you. But by then, it was too late. You were already in too deep." Alex's mind raced. Dan's death, the years of manipulation, the betrayals. It all started to make a sickening kind of sense. Whoever this was, they had orchestrated everything, pushing him towards this moment. "So what now?" Alex demanded, struggling to keep his voice steady. "You've revealed your hand. What do you want from me?" The voice was calm, almost amused. "Now, Alex, you have a choice. You can keep fighting, keep trying to dismantle the network piece by piece. But you'll never win that way. Or you can join us. With your talents, you could do more than just fight the darkness. You could control it. Alex felt his heart pound in his chest. You think I would join you after everything you've done? Why not? You've already done things you never thought you were capable of. You've crossed lines, made sacrifices. You're more like us than you realize. And if you refuse, well, we both know how that ends. The line went dead, leaving Alex standing in stunned silence. The revelation had rocked him to his core. He had been manipulated, shaped, and driven to this point by forces beyond his understanding. And now, those forces were offering him a choice. A dark and terrible choice. For hours, Alex sat in the cabin, grappling with the weight of the decision before him. The temptation to join them, to stop running and fighting, was there, gnawing at him. But as he looked at Thomas, peacefully asleep, he knew he could never take that path. He had fought too hard to protect his son from this world, and he would not let that fight be in vain. Finally, Alex made his decision. He knew what he had to do. The next morning, he called Marcus and instructed him to gather everything they had on the network. They would launch a coordinated strike, using the full force of the evidence they had collected to bring down the organization once and for all. It would be risky, but Alex was determined to end this, even if it cost him everything. But as they moved forward with their plan, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that he was still being watched, that the mastermind was still out there, waiting. He knew the battle ahead would be the most dangerous yet, but he was ready. He had been shaped by the darkness, but he refused to let it consume him. The final confrontation would come, and when it did, Alex would be prepared. He would fight for his son, for the people he had lost, and for the chance at a new life. But as he stepped out into the cold morning air, he knew one thing with chilling certainty. The game was far from over.